And here I just started putting the cedar on the face frame. This is going to go behind the doors. It's definitely not a perfect job, but this cedar is kind of forgiving. Plus, if it only lasts a couple of years, I'll just unscrew it and put a different face on. This is my first time using trim screws, finished trim screws, so it should be easy enough to replace. I'm not gluing anything, I'm just screwing it down. So I got all the stiles and the rails covered in cedar. You can still see the pine inside, but the doors will match the front. I was thinking about doing a varnish stain on the outside. And what I did for the panels is, again with the fence pickets, I did a shiplap with my router on all these boards. And I started on this one panel for today just to see how it was going to look. And I think it looks pretty good. So, more to come. So we're supposed to get a lot of heat today, so I thought I'd start early and end early. But I got the short end and the long side all faced off. Still, of course, the top to go. But with a coat of clear varnish, hopefully it'll stay that color for a long time, or as long as it's still standing. Alright, I'm back at it today, working on the doors. I got two of an equal size, another two of an equal size. This one long one is going to be for the propane tank door. And this one was a prototype from a few days ago. I put it together, found out what I was doing wrong. This one is adequate, but I made all the other ones a little better, a little stronger. Same appearance from the outside though, of course. And they're all shiplapped, just like the casing of the cabinet itself. Sorry about spinning you around like that. So they're all just shiplap boards on a door frame. The smaller ones I didn't need a cross beam. The bigger ones I put one in just to be safe. And hopefully it'll weather the storm until I can get I'd like to think of this as a permanent solution, but I know eventually these screws will loosen, and I got glue and staples and all that's going to deteriorate after a while. So at least I have it set up where I will be able to put in thicker screws eventually, or just do minor changes over the years, so I'll be able to keep using it. So what I'm doing today is drawing out where the hinges are going to go, because I'm going to route a little. I'm going to take this overlay and route it down so that this hinge sits all the way down on the overlay. So I could have bought overlay hinges, but I had already routed the one prototype door, so I thought it only takes a second. I thought I'd go ahead and do it on here. You can see this staple was going to be in the way, so anytime I lay out where the hinge is going to go, if there's a piece of metal within that area, I'll pull it before I route anything. So this is my first time trying a guide. I guess some people call it a spacer, bearing, sleeve, but I think it's a 3/8. It doesn't really matter what the size is. The important measure is from the outside of this guide to the bit, and that's where you have to draw out your hinge. In my case, this distance was 1/8 of an inch from the outside of this guide to the bit. So what I did was lay the hinge out on this board, added an 1/8 inch to each dimension. So now it's an 1/8 inch bigger than what I drew. I can't really do this with one hand very well. So I clamped that down, set my depth to this overlay, and I already experimented on one piece of wood. It'll carve out exactly the hinge shape. And because the router bit itself is round, when you go to the corners, it automatically rounds them. And that's why hinges started being manufactured round, is because the edges were being cut with routers. So that's going to be good enough for me. So again, I followed my template, lined it up right, and routed just down to the overlay, so the hinge just slips right in there, and I'll be able to install it from the back, and I'm just going to keep going on all the doors that way. So I got everything all routed, all the doors, and there's a little bit of tear out, but I did all I could. But cedar is kind of just like dried paper towels, not very hard at all. It'll chip, splinter, but it's rot resistant. So now what I'm doing is, this is the back side, of course, so I'm laying the hinges in, and it's a pretty snug fit, so that jig worked out really good. Now I have a bit that's called a VIX bit. You can see there's not a drill bit on the point, there's a little center finder on the point. The drill bit's on the inside. So when you push it down into a hole, the drill bit gets exposed. I don't know if you can see it in there. But what I do is, with my thumb, I'll hold the hinge in place, and I'll just put that VIX bit in each hole. And I can't do it with one hand, but I'll show you when it's done. So after the VIX bit has started a hole for me down there, I just drive in the screws. I'm using a little longer, little stouter screw than came with, because this is going to be a exterior installation. So as long as I can get maybe a year or two extra out of the longer screws. My worst case, or what will probably end up happening, is these screws will come out and I'll end up going all the way through, and then use like a threaded screw and bolt to hold these on. That's what I probably should do in the first place, because that'll resist the weather a lot better, and a nut and bolt works way better than screws in wood if it's going to be outside. So the next step is get all these put in, hang them on the cabinet. So once again, here it is without the cabinet doors. So that's the frame, skeleton, cedar face frame, and I'll finish the back later in the weekend. Otherwise, the other four sides, 4 sides, I'll have this shiplap cedar. So I'll be back when the doors are on. Well, here's all the doors installed. I gotta do a little bit of planing, very little. If it was a harder wood or a nicer job, like in an interior kitchen, I would probably take all the doors off and skim them down just a little bit on the inside. This trim has to get shimmed out. You can see the side pieces line up just fine. There's a little gap right here, so I got to bring this piece of trim out. And when I go to shut it, there's a little rubbing up in these edges here, so I'm gonna plane those down just a little bit. Otherwise, for the most part, they slam good and tight. I'm gonna have to shim that trim as well. I think I'm gonna have to come up with a magnetic solution for this corner. I always knew I was gonna have trouble with it, just because of the design. I had to leave a hole big enough to get a propane tank in and out, and I knew there was no way to really hinge it, because I can't build out the inside. So this is kind of just friction for right now, but I have to come up with a way to magnetically hold it in place, because it friction fits in there well enough. I just got to get a little more support holding it in. But as for aesthetics, it's fine. These turned out okay. Even the trim's all right. Maybe I could use a little shimming out, but for the most part, those close. Again, just a little bit of planing is going to be needed, and that's the one that's been on there for about a week, so business as usual with that. But that's what it looks like with the doors on. So all I got to do now is get the top done. Right now that's just bare plywood. That'll eventually be tile. I've been looking at epoxy, maybe plywood with an epoxy coating. That's supposed to be a nice look and last a long time. But that's it for now. So I got this face frame trimmed up so the doors close as tightly as possible. Of course, there's imperfections in the doors, but with a latch, this should be able to stay shut. If it was solid wood or something, I'd be able to get it a lot tighter, but it is what it is. I was thinking about putting a latch system in between each door, and on these two ends have like a little block of wood here, and then one that turns to lock the cabinet, and here it would turn and lock both. Over here it would lock just the one again. Over here it would lock both. But I'm kicking that around. It could be a possibility. It's free. It's cheaper than buying fancy latches. So we got quite a bit of rain last night. I wish I could have got this done yesterday. But these are the latches that I came up with. Looks kind of rustic. I don't know if this is a permanent solution, but this will certainly keep the overlay underneath the face, so that should keep a lot of water from getting out. But last night we got plenty of water getting in, so I don't know if this is permanent or not, but at least the latch plates are on, and whatever I decide to go with long term will be easier to put on. We'll give this a try for a little while though.